Sometimes silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. There comes a moment, my friends, when the quiet between two people stops being a pause and starts becoming a message. A message that says, this is no longer a conversation, it's a conclusion. That's what today's talk is about. The day they finally realize the silence isn't punishment, it's forever. Hey folks, imagine this for a second. You're standing in front of a door you've knocked on for years. Sometimes it opened, sometimes it slammed in your face, sometimes it stayed halfway, just enough to give you hope. But one day you stop knocking, you just walk away. And at first they laugh. They think you'll be back. But as the days pass, the laughter fades into confusion. Then confusion becomes fear. Because suddenly they realize that silence isn't you waiting, it's you gone. You see, people mistake silence for weakness because they've never experienced the strength it takes to stay quiet. We live in a world where everyone is talking, posting, reacting, proving something to someone. But silence, real silence, is rebellion. It's like walking out of a burning house and refusing to explain why you left. Marcus Aurelius once said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And if your thoughts are filled with peace instead of pain, then your silence starts to shine differently. It's not cold, it's calm. It's not avoidance, it's evolution. My friends, the lie they told you is this, that silence means you don't care, that if you were strong you'd speak up, fight back, show them you still feel something. But here's the truth, they say that because they fear the kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself. They fear stillness because stillness means control. You're not reacting, you're not explaining, you're not giving them access to your emotions anymore. And that, my friends, terrifies them. It's funny, isn't it? When you finally stop explaining yourself, people start wondering what's changed. They start analyzing your quiet like it's some kind of code. They'll say, he's playing games. But no, you're not playing. You're done playing. You're not silent because you're angry. You're silent because you've healed. Think of it like this. When a storm passes, the loudest thing isn't the thunder anymore. It's the silence that follows. That deep, humbling calm that tells you something powerful just happened. That's you now. You're not the thunder anymore. You're the stillness after it. And listen, folks, I know silence isn't easy. It's not glamorous. Sometimes it feels lonely. Sometimes it feels like maybe you made a mistake. But that's just the echo of your old self fading away. Every time you resist the urge to break that silence, you're building something stronger. Discipline, self-respect, peace. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that's exactly what this kind of silence is. Mastery. You're not controlled by anger, not by love, not by guilt. You're guided by clarity. You've outgrown the noise. So if you've been wondering whether your silence means you've lost, trust me, you haven't. You've just leveled up. Because when silence is misunderstood, it's often because the other person is still living in chaos. But when you understand silence, you start living in peace. Stay with me, because in this journey we're going to break every lie that made you think silence was weakness. We'll show you that silence is strength, silence is strategy, and most of all, silence is freedom. Type it in the comments right now. My silence is my power. Press that like button, subscribe to my channel, and remember this. Stay calm, stay strong, stay silent. Number 1. When they realize the silence isn't a pause, it's a goodbye. The loudest sound in love is often the silence that follows it. There's a moment, my friends, when they stop laughing, when they stop calling your silence a game and start realizing it's not a pause, it's a goodbye. At first, they think they're in control. They think the silence is just part of the dance, the same back and forth they've always played. They tell themselves, he'll come back. He always does. They sip their coffee, scroll through their phone, and smile at the thought of you still waiting, still hoping, still holding on. But time, folks, time has a funny way of separating what's real from what's assumed. Because silence, when it stretches, starts to sound different. It's no longer a waiting room, it becomes a wall. Imagine a bird that once sang every morning outside their window. It sang through the storms, through the cold, through the chaos. Then one day it doesn't sing. The first morning they don't notice. The second, they assume it's resting. By the third, they start to listen for it. By the fourth, they start to miss it. And by the fifth, they finally realize it's not coming back. That's how your silence feels to them now. It's not noise they miss, it's presence, the energy, the reassurance, the safety of knowing you were always there. But here's where it hits hard. They realize your silence doesn't have anger behind it. It's not sharp. It's not trying to prove anything. It's soft, final, unbothered, and that's what scares them most. Because as long as you were angry, they still had a piece of you. As long as you argued, defended, explained, or reacted, they had your attention. But when you go quiet, truly quiet, they lose something deeper than love. They lose access. They start asking themselves questions they once made you ask. Did he really mean it this time? Did he stop caring? Is he talking to someone else? Did I push him too far? The same doubts they planted in your mind are now blooming in theirs. And this time, they can't escape them because the silence doesn't end. It doesn't fade. It grows. Every day you don't reach out becomes another message they can't ignore. Every night your name doesn't appear becomes another reminder that maybe, just maybe, you're serious this time. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's what you've done. You've taken your power back from their hands and placed it back into your own. They can't manipulate your reaction anymore because there isn't one. They can't twist your words because you've stopped giving them any. They can't pull you back into the storm because you've learned how to live above it. But don't be fooled, my friends. It's not easy. The first nights are hard. The mind whispers, maybe I should just check in. The heart argues, maybe she misses me. The old habits try to resurrect themselves, promising comfort but hiding pain. You'll question your silence, doubt your strength, even miss the chaos. That's the trap, the illusion that peace is loneliness when in truth, peace just feels unfamiliar at first. The fear they feel now is the same fear you had to conquer. The fear of being forgotten, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear that your absence won't be noticed. But what they don't know is that your silence isn't meant to be noticed, it's meant to be felt. And trust me, they feel it. They feel it when they open their phone and see no message. They feel it when they scroll through old photos and realize the smile they once took for granted isn't theirs to see anymore. They feel it when they realize the quiet is heavier than any argument could ever be. It's human nature to assume silence is temporary, to believe that if someone really cared, they'd eventually speak. But here's the lie. They told themselves that caring and chasing are the same thing. They built their sense of power on the idea that as long as you cared, you'd keep coming back. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. True care doesn't mean attachment. It means letting go of what destroys your peace. It means walking away not because you stopped loving, but because you started respecting yourself. The hardest part for them isn't losing you, it's realizing they never truly knew your strength. They saw your emotions, not your endurance. They mistook your forgiveness for weakness. They thought your patience was a leash. They never realized that when a calm man goes silent, it's not because he's lost, it's because he's finally found himself. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." And freedom, my friends, doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of unreturned calls, unanswered texts, and unread messages. It's the quiet confidence of a man who no longer needs to explain his worth. They'll replay it all, the arguments, the laughter, the moments they thought they had you figured out, and they'll start to notice something new. The pattern's broken, the script's flipped. The ending they used to write for you no longer exists. They can't call you back into the same story because you've already closed the book. And that's when the realization sets in. The silence isn't a pause, it's a goodbye. You're not ignoring them. You've evolved beyond needing to respond. You're not punishing them. You're protecting yourself. You're not waiting for closure. You are the closure. So to anyone watching this who's been told their silence means they don't care, don't believe that lie. Silence means you've learned what noise costs. It means you've chosen your peace over your pain. It means you're not trying to prove you matter anymore. You already know you do. Stay with me, my friends, because what's coming next will show you why the silence they fear is the very silence that sets you free. Type it in the comments right now. My silence speaks strength. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world around you. Because the day they realize your silence isn't punishment, it's forever, is the day you finally rise above the noise. Number 2. When they wait for the echo that never comes. Sometimes the scariest sound in the world is no sound at all. When the silence stretches long enough, something inside them shifts. The laughter fades, the certainty cracks, and suddenly they start waiting. Not for your words, no, for the echo of your presence. They check their phone a little more often, scroll through messages they never answered, glance at your social media hoping for a sign, anything that tells them you're still orbiting their world. But all they find is quiet, and the truth they've avoided starts to sink in. The silence isn't a pause in the conversation, it's the end of it. You see, folks, when you've always been the one to fix things, your absence becomes louder than any argument ever was. It's like walking into a room where music used to play, and suddenly the air feels heavy. The silence becomes a mirror, reflecting all the words they never said and all the gratitude they never gave. They start to wonder, was it always this quiet, or did I just never listen before? At first, they'll rationalize it. He's just busy. He'll come around. He's probably waiting for me to apologize. But the human mind has a limit for denial. And once the silence outlasts their pride, fear begins to whisper. What if he's really done this time? What if I took it too far? What if he finally meant it when he said he was tired? Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That's what your silence is. Not revenge, but transformation. You're no longer reacting to what broke you. You've evolved beyond it. You're no longer proving, pleading, or performing. You've shifted from noise to peace, and that shift is unshakable. They can't understand it because they've never lived without drama. Their mind runs on reaction, on noise, on the illusion of importance that comes from chaos. And when chaos loses its favorite player, it collapses. They'll try to provoke you with indirect posts, sudden memories, or subtle guilt trips. But the silence you've chosen isn't an act of war. It's the signing of a peace treaty with yourself. You're no longer fighting them, you're freeing yourself, and that's what hurts them the most, because your peace makes their chaos obvious. Your calm exposes their noise, your stillness reveals their dependence. They used to control you with emotion, but now they realize emotion no longer works on you. That's when they start to panic. Because if they can't get a reaction, they can't get validation. And without validation, they're left face to face with themselves. And that's a conversation they've spent their whole life avoiding. Imagine this, my friends, a magician without an audience. The tricks stop working when no one's watching. That's what your silence has done. You've stopped clapping for the illusion. You've stopped giving attention to the performance. And without your reaction, the act collapses. They'll try to fill the void with noise, dates, distractions, stories about how they're better off. But every loud word they speak will echo back with a quiet truth. They miss the man who stopped speaking. They'll see your name somewhere and freeze. They'll remember the last time you spoke and realize that moment was the end, disguised as an ordinary day. But here's the hard part, my friends. Silence tests you too. There are days when you'll wonder if they ever cared. Days when you'll feel the ache of unspoken closure. Days when the quiet feels like loneliness instead of freedom. But remember this. Peace often feels empty at first because you've spent years mistaking chaos for connection. What you're feeling isn't loss, it's detox. You're withdrawing from emotional addiction, from the need to be needed, from the illusion that love must be loud to be real. Seneca said, "As is a tale, so is life, not how long it is, but how good it is." The same applies to connection. It's not about how often you spoke, but about how deeply you lived it. And if the silence feels heavy now, it's only because it's clearing the space for something purer to grow. They'll try to interpret your silence, to assign motives to it. He's trying to punish me. He's still angry. But they don't understand that silence isn't about them. It's about you. It's the sound of you reclaiming yourself. It's the sound of growth, of boundaries, of choosing dignity over validation. It's not a pause for effect. It's a conclusion written in peace. So yes, they'll wait for the echo. They'll wait for the old version of you to break the quiet. But that version is gone. The silence they fear isn't punishment. It's proof that you've evolved. And that's the beauty of it, folks. You didn't have to slam a door or shout your worth. You simply closed the chapter and let the silence speak for you. Because silence, true silence, isn't the absence of communication. It's the presence of clarity. So when they sit there wondering why you haven't reached out, don't question yourself. Let the silence do what words never could. Because sooner or later, they'll realize what you already know. This silence isn't a tactic. It's the truth. Type it in the comments right now. My silence speaks truth. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world that silence doesn't mean surrender. It means strength. And stay with me, because next we'll talk about the moment that silence turns from confusion into clarity. Number 3. When they finally feel the weight of their own noise. People don't notice the peace they had until the noise they created drowns them. At first they think they can live without your presence. They fill their days with distractions, with people who talk but never connect, with the same shallow patterns they use to hide from truth. They convince themselves they've moved on. They post, they laugh, they tell themselves, "I'm fine." But silence is patient, my friends. It waits. It doesn't chase. It doesn't argue. It just sits quietly until the noise fades, and then it begins to echo. Because that's how it happens. At first, they're loud. They'll talk about you, mock the calmness they couldn't understand, tell their friends, "He's just doing this to get attention." But deep down, they start to notice something. They're the only ones still talking. You're not explaining. You're not defending. You're not posting quotes or indirect messages. You've gone quiet. Not because you're bitter, but because you're better. And that's when they start to feel it, the weight of their own noise. Every time they talk about you, it doesn't soothe them. It exposes them. Every time they try to distract themselves, the silence they ran from sits in the background, waiting for the laughter to fade. Because the truth is, you can't escape silence. You can only delay it. Imagine this, folks. You're standing in an empty canyon. You shout, trying to prove you're still heard. The sound bounces back, but all you hear is your own voice coming back to you. That's them now. Every word they speak, every excuse they make, every justification, they all echo back. The silence has become their mirror, and it shows them what they refused to see when you were there, their chaos, their patterns, their pride. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one that's exactly what you've done." You stopped explaining what peace looks like. You became it. You stopped trying to convince them to see your worth. You started living it. And while you're becoming stronger, they're becoming haunted by the contrast. They'll wonder how you became so calm. They'll question why you aren't angry. They'll even try to provoke you, just to confirm you still care. But your silence will answer what your words no longer need to. Because true detachment doesn't come from pretending not to feel. It comes from mastering your emotions so deeply that nothing outside of you can control them. At this point, they start to feel something they can't name, unease. It's not guilt yet, it's discomfort. They sense that something is off, that the dynamic they depended on has shifted. You see, for them, the noise was control. As long as you reacted, they had power. As long as you explained, they were relevant. But when you stopped explaining, you took away the one thing they relied on most, your emotional energy. And that's what makes silence powerful. It starves the ego. It removes the fuel from manipulation. It ends the game without declaring victory. And in that space, they start to feel small, not because you punished them, but because you stopped participating in their chaos. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." You've stopped wasting it, my friends. You've stopped investing in conversations that go nowhere, apologies that mean nothing, and people who never listen. And when they realize that, when they see you've truly withdrawn, that's when the silence turns into something heavy. Not the silence between two people, but the silence inside them. They start to replay moments, the things you said, the patience you showed, the times they thought you'd always be there. And slowly, realization begins to creep in like a shadow at the edge of their thoughts. You weren't weak. You were loyal. You weren't quiet. You were understanding. You weren't passive. You were patient. And now you're gone. But let me be real with you folks, this isn't easy for you either, because part of you still remembers what it was like to be heard, to care, to hope. You still feel the urge to reach out sometimes. That's the test. That's where your discipline gets forged. Every time you resist, you're teaching yourself that peace is worth the price of distance. Every time you stay silent, you're showing the universe you're done repeating lessons you've already learned. They, on the other hand, are just beginning theirs. They're learning that silence isn't punishment, it's reflection. It's what happens when the noise finally dies down and the truth gets loud. They're seeing, maybe for the first time, that your presence was never ordinary. It was stabilizing. And now that it's gone, the world around them feels a little less certain. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it. In the songs they skip, in the nights they can't sleep, in the spaces you used to fill with your calm. Silence doesn't chase them, it follows them, like a quiet reminder of everything they took for granted. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And now, your silence proves mastery. You no longer serve their emotions. You no longer beg to be seen. You've stepped into the kind of freedom that doesn't shout. It simply exists. So when they finally feel the weight of their own noise, don't pity them. Don't rush to fill the space again. Let it echo. Let it teach them what words never could. Because sometimes silence is the only teacher left. Type it in the comments right now. My silence is my lesson. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you that silence isn't emptiness, it's evolution. And stay with me, because next we'll uncover what happens when silence stops being fear and becomes your freedom. Number 4, when they finally understand you're not waiting, you're gone. Nothing is more powerful than a person who no longer waits for what will never come. There comes a day, my friends, when the denial dies. The confusion, the questions, the waiting, it all fades. And in its place comes realization. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't explode, doesn't beg to be understood. It arrives quietly, like the morning after a storm. That's when they finally see it. You're not waiting anymore. You're gone. At first, they can't believe it. They stare at their phone, waiting for your name to light it up like it used to. They check old messages, scrolling through memories like museum exhibits of what used to be alive. They even convince themselves that maybe you're still there, watching, wondering, hurting. Because that's easier to believe than the truth, that you've moved on not just from them, but from the version of yourself who needed them. It hits them slowly. At first, it's a whisper. He's really not coming back. Then it's a weight that sits heavy on their chest. Because for so long, they believed your love was unconditional. They thought you'd always be the first to reach out, to apologize, to bridge the silence. But this silence isn't a bridge. It's a border. You're no longer standing on the same side. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That's exactly what your silence has become, a code of truth. You don't speak because there's nothing left to say. You don't reach out because what's gone no longer deserves revival. You've stopped waiting for right words from the wrong person. Imagine this, folks. You're standing on a dock, watching a ship you once begged to stay, now sail into the distance. For a while, you keep staring at the horizon, hoping maybe it'll turn around. But after enough sunsets, you realize the ship isn't coming back. And that's when you finally turn your back to the ocean, take a deep breath, and walk toward the land that's been waiting for you all along. That's where you are now. And that's what they can't understand. Because they thought your silence was an act of patience. They thought you were waiting for them to change, to miss you, to realize what they lost. But you weren't waiting. You were healing. You weren't pausing. You were moving. You weren't frozen. You were freeing yourself from the chains of false hope. You see, for them, the silence was still a game. They kept looking for the pattern they knew, the message after the distance, the apology after the anger, the reassurance after the coldness. But this time, the pattern broke. No message came, no closure followed, no words were offered to make it easier. And that's what makes this silence different. It's not the silence of waiting, it's the silence of walking away without turning back. It confuses them because they still think in cycles, you think in endings. They believe everything can be undone with the right words. You know some things can only be accepted. That's what Stoic recovery is, my friends. It's the art of acceptance. The understanding that peace doesn't come from fixing what's broken. It comes from refusing to break yourself trying to fix it. They'll tell themselves stories to protect their ego. He must be mad. He's probably just pretending. He'll talk when he calms down. But no, this isn't anger, it's awareness. You've outgrown the conversations that go nowhere. You've outgrown the need to prove your worth to someone who couldn't see it when it was right in front of them. You've outgrown the idea that closure must come from them. And that's what they'll never forget. That you didn't make an announcement, didn't slam a door, didn't leave a final message for attention. You just vanished into peace. And nothing haunts a person more than peace they can't disturb. Seneca said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." And walking away, my friends, is exactly that, an act of courage. Because you're choosing uncertainty over toxicity, solitude over chaos, and self-respect over false hope. That's not weakness, that's mastery, that's bravery. They thought you'd wait because they were used to your loyalty. They thought you'd return because they mistook your compassion for dependence. But silence teaches the truth. It shows who's truly growing and who's just performing growth. You've learned that waiting is a form of self-abandonment when the person you're waiting for isn't coming back. You've learned that love without respect is just attachment disguised as hope. And most of all, you've learned that silence isn't loneliness, it's clarity. Now they sit with what they created, their pride, their choices, their consequences. And the silence, the same one they once mocked, now becomes their teacher. Every day you stay quiet, It speaks to them louder than any words could. It tells them you've accepted what they refused to. It tells them the chapter has closed. It tells them that the man who once fought for their attention now fights for his peace. My friends, this is the moment when silence transforms into power. Not the power to control others, but the power to no longer be controlled. You're no longer waiting for someone to understand what they lost. You've already understood what you gained, yourself. And that's the most powerful realization of all. That peace isn't found in someone's return. It's found in your refusal to return to what broke you. Type it in the comments right now. I'm not waiting. I'm free. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world that silence isn't a pause. It's a decision. It's not patience. It's peace. And stay with me, because next we're going to talk about what happens when your silence stops hurting and starts healing everything they never could. Number 5. When the silence starts to heal what they couldn't. The wound begins to close the moment you stop reopening it for someone who never meant to heal it. There comes a point, my friends, when silence stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like medicine. The same quiet that once felt unbearable begins to soothe you. The same emptiness that once made you restless begins to give you peace, and the same distance that once felt like punishment becomes the very thing that sets you free. That's the beauty of silence. It transforms. What starts as heartbreak becomes healing. What begins as loneliness becomes liberation. At first, it doesn't feel that way. The early days are heavy. The silence feels sharp, like walking through a house full of memories where every corner whispers their name. You wake up reaching for your phone, expecting a message that never comes. You tell yourself, maybe they'll realize. But then something shifts. You stop waiting for realization and start focusing on recovery. That's when the silence begins its real work. Because silence, folks, isn't just the absence of words. It's the space where truth finally breathes. It's the detox after the noise. It's where your nervous system starts to calm, your self-respect starts to rebuild, and your energy returns to you piece by piece. For so long, you poured into someone who couldn't receive. You kept explaining yourself to someone who didn't want to understand. You tried to love someone who was addicted to conflict, and that drained you. But silence, it reverses the damage. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. The pain that silence first brings becomes the very path that heals you. Because healing doesn't happen in reaction, it happens in stillness. When you stop chasing closure, you realize that peace was never lost. It was simply buried under all the noise. They, on the other hand, are not ready for that kind of silence. Because silence demands self-reflection. It forces you to face what you've done, what you ignored, what you took for granted. And that's what starts to haunt them. They look around and realize that your energy, your patience, your warmth, all of it is gone. They thought your presence was guaranteed, but now it's just absence. And absence has a way of becoming its own kind of mirror. It's ironic, isn't it? When you were speaking, they weren't listening. Now that you're silent, every unspoken word screams at them. They replay the things they dismissed. The times they rolled their eyes, the moments they thought they could replace you. And slowly, your silence starts to heal what their validation could never fix, your self-worth. You realize something profound. You never needed their understanding to heal. You just needed your own permission to stop bleeding for someone who didn't notice your wounds. You don't have to prove that you cared. You don't have to win them back to feel worthy. You just have to let go and let the silence do what the noise never could. Seneca said, "To be calm is the highest achievement of the self." That calmness, my friends, is what your silence starts to create. You stop checking your phone. You stop explaining your choices. You stop wondering if they regret it. You begin to notice that peace is louder than attention, and that solitude feels better than forced connection. And this is when the healing becomes visible. Your sleep improves. Your focus sharpens. You start doing things not to distract yourself, but because you enjoy them again. You're not running from pain anymore. You're walking toward purpose. The silence becomes your sanctuary, your training ground, your proof that you can stand alone without falling apart. Meanwhile, they're still trying to understand the silence. They can't believe how someone who once fought for them now feels unreachable. They look for traces of you online, waiting for a sign that you still care. But every day that passes without a word from you sends a louder message than any text ever could. You've outgrown the need to be seen by someone who never truly looked. It's not revenge, it's renewal. You're not trying to make them regret losing you. You're simply learning to love yourself enough not to return. You've stopped letting their absence define your worth. You've stopped letting their silence dictate your story, because this time the silence belongs to you and you're using it to rebuild. Think of it like fire, my friends. Fire destroys, but it also purifies. Silence burns at first. It scorches your attachment, your need for closure, your addiction to their presence. But then, from those ashes, something new starts to grow. A steadiness, a peace, a version of you that doesn't depend on anyone else to feel complete. That's what the silence heals, the parts of you that thought love had to hurt. Epictetus said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And once you master silence, you realize most of the pain was mental. It wasn't their loss, it was your fear of letting go. But now that fear is gone. You don't crave their return. You don't wait for their apology. You've made peace with not knowing why they couldn't see your worth, because now you see it yourself. And that's when the silence stops hurting. It becomes home. It becomes proof of evolution. You no longer look back. You don't need to. Because the silence has done what they never could. It healed you. Type it in the comments right now. My silence is my healing. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world around you that silence isn't loneliness. It's recovery. And stay with me, because next, we'll talk about what happens when silence doesn't just heal you, it starts to transform you. Number 6. When the silence turns into transformation. The same silence that once broke you will one day build you. There's a stage, my friends, when silence stops being something you endure and becomes something you embody. It's no longer about holding your tongue, it's about holding your peace. What used to feel like emptiness now feels like expansion. What used to feel like loss now feels like becoming. This is the moment silence turns from medicine into transformation. Because let's be honest, the silence was never easy. It stretched you. It tested you. It forced you to face yourself without the noise of validation. You had to sit with memories that burned, with questions that had no answers, with emotions that demanded your attention. You couldn't run to distractions anymore. You couldn't numb the ache with hope. The silence stripped you down to the core, and that's where the real transformation began. Imagine a forest after a wildfire, folks. To the untrained eye, it looks destroyed. Blackened trees, ash everywhere, silence hanging heavy in the air. But beneath that destruction, something powerful is happening. The soil is being renewed. The ground is preparing for new life. Seeds that could only sprout through fire begin to push through the ash. That's what you're becoming. A new version of yourself, growing quietly in the soil of what once burned you. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Look well into yourself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if you will always look there." That's what this silence is teaching you, to stop searching for strength in others and to start finding it in yourself. You no longer need their attention to feel seen. You no longer need their apology to find closure. You no longer need their words to define your worth. You've realized that silence isn't a gap between relationships. It's a bridge back to yourself. They, however, don't understand this part. They still see silence as a tactic, a phase, a waiting room. They think you're still in that quiet space hoping for their return. But what they don't realize is that your silence has changed form. It's not about them anymore. It's about your evolution. The silence that once hurt you has now become your discipline, your power, your protection. And here's what's beautiful about it. Silence has made you more observant. You see things differently now. You notice the small red flags you used to ignore. You feel the peace that chaos once drowned out. You catch yourself before you overextend, over-explain, or overgive. Silence has rewired your instincts. It's made you stronger, not by hardening your heart, but by softening your attachment. You've learned that letting go isn't giving up, it's growing up. Seneca said, "It is a rough road that leads to the heights of greatness." And this silence, that rough, uncomfortable, sometimes painful road, is what's taking you there. Because transformation doesn't happen when everything's loud and easy. It happens in the quiet, when the world isn't clapping for you, when no one's watching, when you're rebuilding quietly in the dark. That's when your spirit strengthens, your mind sharpens, and your emotions settle into clarity. They'll notice it eventually. They'll see it in the way you carry yourself now, in your calmness, in your lack of reaction, in your refusal to entertain what no longer serves you. They'll wonder what happened, what changed, how you became so composed. And here's the irony. What changed was everything, and what happened was nothing. You simply stopped letting people who never understood your silence control your peace. You've stopped chasing closure and started creating peace. You've stopped seeking understanding from people who are still lost in their own confusion. You've stopped apologizing for choosing yourself. That's transformation. It's quiet, it's subtle, but it's permanent. Think about the caterpillar, my friends. It doesn't announce its transformation. It disappears. It goes silent. It wraps itself in stillness, unseen, unheard. To the outside world, it looks like nothing's happening. But inside that silence, everything is changing. Its old form dissolves, and something new takes shape. And when it emerges, it doesn't crawl, it flies. That's you. Your silence is your cocoon. The world may not understand what's happening, but you do. This transformation isn't about becoming someone new, it's about returning to who you were before you were broken. You're not trying to prove your strength anymore, you're simply living it. You're no longer seeking to be chosen, you're busy choosing yourself. You're no longer fighting for attention, you're focused on alignment. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." That's the essence of this silence. It's freedom. Freedom from overthinking, from explaining, from trying to fix what isn't yours to fix. You're not waiting for an apology anymore because peace became your closure. You're not waiting for them to miss you because your growth is no longer dependent on their awareness. And the beautiful part? You start to enjoy it. The quiet mornings, the slow evenings, the focus returning to your craft, your goals, your body, your purpose. You realize you're not lonely, you're aligned, you're not isolated, you're intentional. You've stopped existing for reaction and started living for meaning. That's when they notice something terrifying. You don't just look peaceful, you look untouchable. The version of you they once manipulated, guilted, or ignored doesn't exist anymore. You've become someone they can't reach with confusion or control. Because you're no longer speaking their language, you're fluent in peace now. My friends, the silence that once made you question your worth is now the silence that proves it. You've gone from reacting to reflecting, from hurting to healing, from waiting to walking. That's the transformation, when the silence stops being something that happened to you and becomes something you are. Type it in the comments right now. My silence is my transformation. Show them, show yourself, show the world that what once broke you has built you, and stay with me, because next we'll go even deeper, into the moment your silence doesn't just transform you, but begins to empower you. Number 7. When silence becomes their reminder and your freedom. Peace doesn't need to prove itself. It simply outlasts everything that doesn't belong. There's a moment, my friends, when the silence stops being a phase and becomes a presence. It's not something you're doing anymore, it's something you've become. You carry it with you. You walk with it, speak through it, breathe it. It's in the way you move, the way you smile, the way you no longer rush to fill the air with explanations. The silence that once felt like distance has become your identity. And that's when it starts to happen. They begin to feel it everywhere. At first, it's subtle. They'll see something that reminds them of you, a place, a song, a random phrase, and the quiet hits. It's that same stillness that used to surround your presence. It's not loud, but it's heavy. It lingers. It makes them remember how your energy once filled the room, how your voice once brought calm, how your presence once made chaos feel safe, but now, nothing, just silence. And that silence, my friends, becomes their reminder. They used to believe your absence was punishment. They used to think your quiet meant anger, pride, ego. But now they're starting to understand. It's peace. It's not that you're trying to hurt them. It's that you've stopped hurting yourself for them. You're not teaching them a lesson. You've already learned yours, and your silence says it better than words ever could. I've moved on, not from you, but from the need for you to understand me. Marcus Aurelius said, "Withdraw into yourself." The rational principle that rules has this nature. It is content with itself when it does what is just, and so secures tranquility. That's what you've done. You've withdrawn into yourself, not to hide, but to heal, not to prove, but to protect. You've stopped seeking tranquility in others because you've found it within yourself. That's what true silence really is. It's not about closing doors, it's about opening space inside your soul for peace to live. And while they're still trying to decode your silence, you're using it to rebuild your life. You've become more intentional. You're focused on growth, purpose, discipline. You wake up without anxiety. You go to sleep without replaying the past. You've stopped reacting and started creating. You've realized that silence isn't the absence of connection. It's the foundation of clarity. And the beautiful part? The quieter your world becomes, the louder your inner strength speaks. They, on the other hand, can't escape it anymore. The silence they once ignored now follows them. It shows up when they scroll through old photos, when they pass by places you used to go, when they hear your favorite song. It's no longer your silence haunting them, it's their conscience. Because deep down, they know your peace was never the problem. It was the proof that you loved with honesty. But now, your silence isn't about them at all. It's about freedom. Freedom from repeating cycles. Freedom from explaining your worth. Freedom from waiting for closure that was never coming. Silence has become your boundary, your declaration that you refuse to live in emotional debt. You're no longer trying to win their attention. You're protecting your energy. You've turned absence into armor. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And that's exactly what this silence has made you. Brave enough to walk away from chaos, strong enough to stay gone, wise enough to know that healing in silence is not isolation. It's elevation. You've risen above the noise that once consumed you. And they feel it now. They finally understand that your silence isn't a punishment. It's permanence. They can sense it in the way the energy has shifted, in the way your name no longer reaches back when it's spoken. It's like shouting into a canyon where the echo no longer returns. They realize they're no longer part of your story. They're just a chapter that ended quietly, and nothing humbles the ego more than realizing the story continues without them. But here's what makes this silence powerful. It doesn't just end a connection, it transforms your entire direction. You begin to attract peace, depth, and alignment. You stop being addicted to intensity and start craving consistency. You no longer chase the highs of temporary attention. You build the foundation for lasting purpose. You've learned that true power is quiet and true healing is private. So let them feel the silence. Let them sit in the echo of what they lost. Because while they replay what went wrong, you're out there writing what's next. You've learned that letting go doesn't mean erasing the past. It means refusing to relive it. You've learned that silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom in its purest form. And when they finally realize the silence isn't punishment, it's forever, you'll already be too far gone, too at peace, too focused on your own journey to even notice. That's the final stage of Stoic recovery, when the silence that once protected your heart now powers your entire life. Type it in the comments right now. My silence is my freedom. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world that silence doesn't mean you're gone. It means you've risen. If this message spoke to your soul, hit that like button, subscribe to Stoic Blessing, and share this video with someone who needs to remember that silence isn't a punishment. It's peace. Because one day, my friends, they'll finally realize your silence was never empty. It was full of healing, of strength, of everything they were too loud to notice. And that day you'll smile, knowing you already found what they're still searching for, peace beyond the noise.